So it was a school of hard knocks, and I consider it like tuition for a class. So I got a class in how to pick the right renter, and it cost me tuition because we had to repair the damage. So, that's the way I kind of look at it. And so look at every situation, good and mostly the bad ones, because that's where we learn the most is in the bad situations. Look at every bad situation as as an education.
Investors, welcome back to another go-round of Masters of the Market. Of course, yours truly, Ari Gutman here, and I am back with Kevin Burgess after an incredible series on Masters of the Market just weeks ago with Kevin and the Average Joe Dividends, and of course also doing a round of Masters of the Market with Kevin Burgess before, specific to dividend investing. I had to invite him back on here to Masters of the Market to actually talk all about real estate. Now, before Kevin and I get into it today, the reason I wanted to bring Kevin on to Masters of the Market once again is because Kevin has a net worth just north of $4 million. And of course, he's achieved some of that wealth by dividend investing, which we talked all about. And I'll put the link there in the description for all of you to check out that specific Masters of the Market chat. But moreover, now I wanted to touch upon Kevin's real estate portfolio because most of his wealth there was actually amassed through real estate. And it seems to me that he expedited his net worth, if you will, by investing into real estate. So Kevin, thank you for joining me once again here on Masters of the Market. Gotta say, you're becoming a norm on the show. I might as well hand the mic over to you to just take over completely.
No, I'm happy to be here, man. I'm excited.
I wanted to toss it right over to you. And I know the first question that I asked on our first ever Masters of the Market was, right, your net worth and how you got started with dividend investing. And what came out through that was actually your tie-in to real estate. So now I want to go very specifically down this real estate path with you and ask you how you got started in real estate and what's your background there in real estate. When did you get started? Give us the whole nine, and then we'll start to get in some deeper questions real estate related.
Gotcha. Yeah, let me give a little bit of even further background. I think for those who haven't seen our prior videos, I didn't come from a wealthy family. One day I was eating a ham sandwich and it was the best ham sandwich I ever had because we didn't have meat in the house. And then, we got married, we had kids, my wife stayed at home. And so I didn't have a wealthy background, and it took a while, right, to build up the capital needed to buy some real estate. But I would say, I'm trying to remember exactly when. It was somewhere around the 2004, 5, 6 time frame. If you recall, in 1999 is when I really got serious about being the CEO of my life, right? Of my family, of my portfolio, of my assets. And so around 2004, I want to say, we bought our first duplex. And that duplex and it wasn't that much. It was like $72,000, which was a lot for me at the time, but it wasn't a lot of money. Now that I look back on it, it wasn't a lot of money. We paid, I think we put 20% down, and then we financed the rest of it. And so that's how I got started in real estate. And from there, we bought more properties and stuff like that, but we'll get into that here in a few minutes. But that's kind of how I got started. It was really about saving up the down payment and getting a mortgage for the balance, and we were off to the races.
How did you, like, I'm curious to know, right? Because I flirt with this real estate idea all the time. And the truth be told, I never got involved in real estate, and it's still in the works for me. It's still just before the call, our talk here, we were talking briefly about it. But what was it for you? First of all, how old were you when you invested into that duplex?
So that would have been actually about 40.
Okay.
I
So
think.
40,
Let me think.
40 years old.
Yeah, 30, 39, something like that.
So I still
Yeah,
got
because
time, is what you're telling
oh
me.
yeah, yeah. Oh no, there's plenty of time. Absolutely. There's always time, man.
So what was it about real estate? So because you started investing and you were doing well. I mean, it's a simple investing strategy dividend investing, high quality companies. What led you to real estate investing, or what was the spark moment that you had that said, I got to get a duplex. We got to we got to get an asset in real estate.
Yeah, I had read a book. Actually, it was a couple of years before we actually got started. I read a book by Robert Kiyosaki called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so, I read through that book, and there was a guy who was kind of a mentor for me. He was the boss who hired me in the company I was working for at the time. And he had recommended the book. So I read it, and I was going, man, this guy really makes a great case for buying real estate. And so let me caveat that a little bit. I tried it, right? I tried the his method, and while on paper, it worked, it just wasn't a good fit for me, because his method was, you buy a property, it raises in value a little bit, you refinance that property, pull all the money out that you can, you take that money and you put it in another one. Well, for me, I didn't want to have that stress in my life, right? So I'm fully leveraged now on the property I originally bought, and now I'm leveraged on another property. And if I can't rent one of those properties, guess who's got to still pay the mortgage, right? It's me. So we tried that on a couple, and then we decided to kind of hold off a little bit and let us kind of swallow those, rather than just trying to cram things in our real estate portfolio. Let's kind of eat this slow and have a better, more measured approach at real estate. So that's what we did. We bought this particular duplex. Then I went to refinance that one. Remember, I'm on the Kiyosaki plan, and ended up buying a second one, which, now I don't regret at all. But at the time, it was pretty stressful.
Sure.
So we ended up with the two duplexes, and then we slowed down a little bit. But I will say that, a couple of years later, I ended up with a third one and then a fourth one. So I am at that point with four duplexes. And so maybe I can give a little bit of background on the
Please.
real
Yeah.
estate market versus the stock market. So, well, first of all, for me, having a bit of diversification outside of the stock market made, great sense, because if the market's down, the rents are still coming in, right? So, that kind of works out. But when I look at real estate prices, I went back actually today preparing for this and looked at real estate prices and compared to the S&P 500. And if I invested in the S&P 500 and real estate at the same time in 1980, by the time 2000 hit, I would have been better off in the stock market. However, when I go from 2000 to 2020, it's basically a dead heat. But what I will say, as I try to put my earphone back in, is that if where the benefit comes in real estate is not just the property appreciation, but the fact that you've got somebody living in that property who is paying the bills. So it would be the same thing if somebody had loaned me money to invest in the stock market and someone else paid that loan off. You see what I mean?
Sure.
So it's the same kind of thing. So there is a leverage that occurs with real estate that you don't get in the stock market. So your tenants are actually paying your mortgage, they're paying the utility bill, they're paying the taxes, they're paying all of that. And so once you get into that property and you can keep it rented, then it's growing not only on the real estate side, but the cash flow is coming into your pocket. So I think real estate adds a lot to the table, because you can have these tenants actually paying off all your debts and your taxes and things that are related to that property. Don't get that so much in the stock market, right?
Sure.
So I think it's a good diversification.
So you turned 40, you bought the first duplex. How long after then until you bought the second and then third?
It wasn't long. The second one was maybe a year or so later, and then I think we did wait a couple of years, and then I bought two just bam bam because they were available, right? There was
Sure.
an opportunity,
And you
so
had the
sometimes you got to take the
experiences.
opportunity, right? Yeah. So
So
that's kind of how fast that went.
the question that comes to mind, so you bought the first one, you had the second. Were you living in the first one when you bought it? Because a lot of people will first try to buy a duplex or a triplex, right? Fourplex, whatever plex, right? And then move into the actual building, and then they'll rent out the other spaces. that was also a part of my plan before I actually moved, out of the United States, was buy, potentially a duplex or triplex, move into one of the units, flip the building, right? And then rent out all the units and then go for the next one. Was that
Yeah.
what you did, or did you have a single family home you were already living in? You just bought the duplex?
Yeah, we had at that time 4 kids, right? So it was we already had our home, we had our kids. So I wouldn't have been able to fit in a two-bedroom duplex, right?
Sure.
So, but I do recommend the model you just talked about. I do recommend that for anybody who's wanting to get into real estate. So for several reasons. So let's say it's a duplex, right? And you move in, you buy the duplex, you move into one side, you get to keep an eye on what's going on at that duplex, right? So you got, you're there every day. You understand what's happening from a maintenance perspective, from noise perspective. I mean, just everything about the duplex. You are there every day living that. And so not only is it a good way to have someone else pay for your living expenses, which is basically what happens, but
Sure.
you get to keep an eye on your property. And so I think that's a great model. We did not go that route because I started later in life as opposed to earlier. If we'd started earlier, I would have definitely followed that plan.
Sure. Ultimately taking over as the judge, the jury, the police, and everything for
In the
for that
executioner,
tenant.
yes.
So real estate, it always sounds so easy, and even right, the average Joe dividends, he talked about being in real estate at one point, and it was a little bit too much for him because of the tenant. And I know a couple other YouTubers who are out there who have also dabbled in real estate and had trouble with their tenants. I'm curious to know from you, right? You got the duplex and then you started adding right to your portfolio. Did you have experiences with, or I'll use, I hate to say bad tenants, but bad tenants? What were your experiences like? Are there ways for us who are newer to the game of real estate to avoid getting bad tenants so we can make this process easier for ourselves?
Yeah, so yeah, we've had, our experiences, and just a shout out to my father-in-law. He was a lot of times the one who would be local. The We were a little bit too far away. And what I would suggest is if you're going to get real estate, get it close by, get it to where you can keep an eye on it. So he handled a lot of this for us, but we did have to evict some tenants. And what we found was the ways to the things to think about as you're thinking about, dealing with these things, is to not cut yourself short in rent.
Mm,
So, a lot of times people will say, oh, I need to get this rented, so I'm going to make it like really cheap so that I can really get a renter fast. And usually what you end up with are bad renters.
sure.
So if you take your time and make sure that you're getting at market value or even a little better, because you're going to be getting people who, I don't know how else to say this other than that they can afford that. And
Yep.
because they can, that means they're responsible, and that means that they take care of the things that they have. And so you just get a different clientele when your rents are at or above market. So I would say that's the first thing that we changed that helped us tremendously, is that we got a different thought process in our clientele because we raised the rents.
It's interesting. It reminds me of the stock market almost. It's like
Yeah.
when someone's trying to make a quick buck and they invest in a penny stock, maybe, I don't know, they throw their 10,000 into a penny stock as opposed to like a quality company wanting the quick buck, but instead the market flips, or, whatever may happen, the company
Yeah.
flips and they lose
Yeah.
their money. It's, you try to make this quick buck in real estate, it almost sounds the same.
It's a great analogy. Yeah, it really is. Very similar.
So okay, so I want to go back here. Once you started to amass real estate, how quickly did your net worth, I feel double, triple?
Mhm.
Because the moment you add real estate, of course, to your portfolio, right? The value, it's really the appreciation, the value of the properties that's going to boost your net worth. What happened? What did you experience in terms of your net worth from the get-go with real estate, from that first duplex, the second, the third, the fourth? So I'll ask, what would you have done differently, knowing now what you know? Would you have done it earlier? Like I'm fascinated because like I said, the last Masters of the Market chat, you shared that real estate exponentially, right, expedited your net worth. So I
Yeah.
want to touch upon this.
Yeah, let me kind of walk through the stages of that. So we bought our first duplex, $72,000, right? We bought a second one, a third one, then a fourth one. And at that point, I became, as I would characterize it, asset rich and cash poor, right? Because we've got these mortgages, we've got taxes, we've got maintenance, we've got all this cash that's getting, so the rents are coming in, but they're getting sucked up with all these obligations. So, we're asset rich and cash flow poor. I happen to have saved up a little bit of money. So what I ended up doing was, rather than continuing to build and grow the asset values, just continuing to buy and buy these highly leveraged properties, I went in and began to pay one of those off. So rather than focusing on buying another one, right, putting 20% down, getting another mortgage, I put the money on the mortgage of one of the properties. And then we sold one of the properties and took the gain on that, which was, I don't know, around at that point is about $40,000. So it was a pretty big gain in
Sure.
just, 4 or 5 years, right? It was a pretty big gain. So we ended up taking that plus the money we'd saved and paid off one of the units. So that meant all of the cash flow that was going to the mortgage now was coming to us. And that's the point where I realized that the real value in real estate is having real estate that is paid off, that you're getting all of the cash coming in from that property. So then we ended up taking that cash and I had a job, right? So we had our budget set up and we were living the way we needed to live. And so all of the cash then that came in on that third duplex now, because remember we sold the fourth one, so we have three, paid off the third one, and all of that cash now we started putting onto the second one. And before we knew it, all three duplexes had been paid off.
Wow.
And so we're sitting there with three cash flows coming in that had been going to the bank. And it was just a influx of cash, right? So fast forward to about 2019, we were, all of our duplexes were paid off. We wanted to sell those duplexes and buy a property or vacation rental property at the beach. A beach we've been going to our whole married lives. So it was a special place for us. It's not just that it was any beach, right? Ended up selling those three duplexes and we more than doubled our money on those sales. So, I don't remember exactly how much we got. It was it's like 140 a piece. So what is that? 420. We ended up with about 420 grand. And remember, they're already paid off, right? So we end up with 400, let's say 400,000 after real estate commission and stuff.
Sure.
So we ended up with that cash and we did what's called a 1031 like kind exchange in the tax code. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to exchange the profits from this property into this other property. And for us, it was the duplexes into this beachfront rental property that's a vacation rental. That property we bought for around 760,000. So we put 420,000 down from our real estate, and then rolled that into, so we didn't have to pay tax on that gain. We rolled that into this new property and ended up, when I retired, I got some funds that were due to me, and I used those funds to pay off this rental property at the beach. And what is interesting, Ari, is that from that point, 2019, remember, we're only 4 years later.
Sure.
The value of that property is now around 1.4 million.
Wow.
It has grown, it has doubled in the last 4 years.
Wow.
And it could probably be worth more if we asked more. We're only going off of, Zillow and real estate,
Sure.
realtor.com and, stuff like that. But the rental property on that beach has really skyrocketed. So, we've basically doubled the value of that real estate. And because of that, the rents are going up as well, right? Because if a new person comes in and buys a property for 1.4 million and I only paid 750,000 for mine, I need less rent because I didn't pay as much, but they need more, right? So I
Sure.
get to take
Sure.
advantage of that. So my rental income is going up significantly because the value is going up significantly. So not only is my net worth increasing, my cash flow is increasing. So it's really been a great thing for us, and I talk about it, and to be honest with you, I really haven't discussed this with a lot of people before. So you're probably going to need to ask me questions because I will probably be talking around things like people know what I'm talking about
Sure.
because I do in my mind. But so if I'm missing any of
No,
the
so
pieces
far,
or
I
something
mean,
doesn't
look,
make
it's been
sense,
incredibly streamlined and simple. I
good.
hope for all viewers out there, at least on my end, that's the case. But I also come from a real estate background of working real estate in Manhattan, so maybe that I
Yeah.
I hope for everybody it's simple, but I think you're right on the money. Now you actually shared right how you can use at least the tax game to your benefit in real estate. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how taxes play a major role when it comes to real estate and saving money with real estate, right? Rolling your money into the next property, or perhaps using money from one property to buy the next, because this is also, I feel, a huge benefit that you get specifically when you invest into real estate. And then after that, we'll head in the direction, right, of the right property, what properties to look for. So we'll go in that direction. But I first just want to hear you talk a little bit about taxes.
Yeah, let me mention also one other property that I haven't talked about, which is our home in the mountains, and that's the one that I retired to a couple of years ago. We bought that one in 2006, did
Is
some remodeling to
is that where
it,
you're at
and
now?
no, we actually sold that this year and bought the farm in Alabama. So we
There
used
we
those
go.
funds to buy this farm, as well as another rental house. So that's kind of interesting as well. So
So
we
Kevin Burge is the real estate kingpin.
So, so we're just finishing up the remodel of this rental house here. And so that's going to be kind of fun, when we get to that place. But
Sure.
so anyway, it wasn't just those duplexes going into the beach rental. It was also our vacation home in the mountains that basically doubled in value over that period of time. And helped us get this farm and a lot of things that we normally wouldn't have done. So anyway, taxes are a big deal when it comes to real estate. So first of all, your expenses related to renting, your property, which would be property taxes, maintenance, any utilities that you pay, any expenses related to that property are deductible for tax purposes. And if you have a mortgage, the interest off of that mortgage is also deductible for tax purposes. But the other cool thing is that you get to depreciate the asset. So, and that becomes an expense to the property, but it is a non-cash expense, right? You've already bought the property, but it is being theoretically used up by the renter, and therefore you get to depreciate that over time, and that expense goes on your tax return. So you're getting a a non-cash tax deduction, which is very helpful. And we had cases where even though we had cash coming in, we had more expenses because of depreciation than we actually had rental income. And because of that, we got to carry forward tax losses. And as we moved then into this beach property, which is very profitable for us, we've been using up those tax losses over the last couple of years. And I think they're about gone now, but it's been really nice having basically tax-free cash flow coming out of that property. So, it's important from a tax perspective, keep an eye on your expenses, but also realize you got depreciation, you got interest and property taxes and all the things that come with that as deductions. So if you're not interested in the details, if you're not interested in, understanding the financial aspects of real estate, I would recommend that you wait until you are interested before getting into it because it will drive you crazy. It is something that you've got to be on, not 24/7, but you got to be consistently involved in the details of your real estate so that you know what decisions you're making and how that's going to impact you in the future.
Interesting. So active management almost. But I think you've shared
Mhm.
before, you have a management company now, right?
Now we do. Yeah. The duplexes we did not, but
Sure.
now with the vacation rental, and the cool thing about the vacation rental is they rent for a week or 2 weeks at a time. And this is the way I like to say it. It's probably not correct, but it's fun to say. They rent the place and leave before they get tired of it, right? And so therefore they're they take better care of the property. And we have a book that we put, at the property, and people kind of write notes in there to us about the property. And a lot of times I read it. I was there last week, and so I read through the comments in the book, as I always do. And a lot of them will say, thank you for renting your home to us. We have been here for 3 years. We've been here for
Wow.
4 years, and the
It's a home
same
away from
weeks,
home.
right? Yeah, it's their home away from home, and it's almost like it's theirs, right? They come once a year and they rent this house from us, and they enjoy the house, they enjoy the view, they enjoy the atmosphere, and they come back year after year. So that's exciting. But when I think about this rental property, there's a lot of pros to that. One is that we have this real estate company, this rental agency that handles the tenant piece, because I'm retired now, right? I mean, I don't want to deal with that.
The
I don't want to
kingpin
have
is
it on.
retired. He's done.
Yeah. I don't want to have some what is it, Airbnb, right?
Yeah,
Or VRBO website that I'm managing, and I'm trying to, make sure the calendars match up, and I want to make sure that the tenants know what's expected of them. That is all done by this real estate company. They manage the rentals, and I will tell you, this particular property, we probably only have about 4 weeks the whole year that are not rented. And
wow.
one of those we reserve July 4th every year for our family to go there and enjoy the beach together. So, one of those we don't allow a renter to have that particular week. So, it is really a great experience because it's short term. People are loving it, and I don't have to contact them at all. I don't even know their names. So they show up, they go to the rental agency who has the key, they pick the key up, they go there, they have their week, they write in our book, and they
That's
take
it.
the key back to the rental agency. So if something goes wrong, right? Some of the, chatter around real estate is, wow, there's maintenance to do, the toilet's back up, the hot water heater stops working, the sink gets a leak, or whatever, right? I'm trying to think through some of the things that have happened for us, but they don't call me like the duplexes used to, right? They don't call me. They call the rental agency. The rental agency has a crew who will go out and fix the issue. They charge me for it. I have to pay for it. I'm the owner of the property, but I don't get the phone call. I don't have to find somebody to go do it, and I don't have to actually be there while they do it. It is all just seamless, and I really learn about it after the fact, which I'm okay with. So
Sure.
the
It's
thing that they don't
it's
deal
funny.
with.
So that's what when I was in Manhattan, I did asset management, and I
Okay,
was the middleman who got the calls. And I,
gotcha. That's not fun, is it?
every week I jump on with the owners, right, of the buildings, and we
Yeah.
talk. Here are the issues, and not every issue, the larger scale issues, right? But I can certainly tell you that he always had a smile on his face, and he was always
Mm,
somewhere in the Hamptons or wherever he was.
right.
And but that's the deal of being in asset management versus the owner.
Right. Yeah, and there's always issues that pop up, right? So one of the current issues for us is it is really difficult to get these days to get insurance on a beachfront property. So we have the insurance doubled this year, and it's not cheap, right? It doubled. And so we were able to work with our real estate agent and find another company that had something very similar to what we had paid the year before. But they have these really specific quirks. And one of them is about the hot water heater. They wanted to validate the date on the hot water heater. Well, when we go to our hot water heater, which was put in 2015, so it's not like it's that old,
Sure.
the nameplate on the hot water heater doesn't have the date stamped on it. So you got the guy who installed it who wrote with a magic marker and said installed January of 2015, but there's nothing stamped on the nameplate of the hot water heater. So we may end up having to replace a good hot water heater so that we can validate the date of the hot water heater for the insurance company. But for the amount of money we're saving, a hot water heater is nothing. So that's
Sure.
so anyway, the point is you're always going to have issues that pop up and you're always going to be dealing with things. You want to work with the people like we're working with our insurance agent. You want to not destroy relationships because they're helping you, right? So if something goes wrong, you try to work through things together, not feeling that they're against you because they're not. They're trying to do their job, and so we're kind of working through this together. And when you get to the other side of that and you do it together, it's a lot better situation. And then, like your client, we're smiling on the other end of the phone. So, but it takes a little while to kind of work through those issues.
Get to the smile, yeah.
That's right.
So what I've heard thus far, right, is just kind of if I look more at that macro lens, you jumped into real estate. It certainly expedited your net, worth. And then, on top of that, we have the game of taxes that one can play and using depreciation, using the liens for the next property. And then now we have, right, you got into getting yourself a real estate management company to do all the heavy lifting, so to speak, for you. This all begs the question, though, now, how do you go about finding a property that's actually a good rental property to invest in?
Yeah, that's a great point. So, kind of walk through some of the steps that I would recommend, having been through this before. First of all, don't get discouraged because, especially in this market, because when I started, there were a lot of properties available, right? In this market, it's hard to get a property to stay on the market for 2 months, right? So it's a little bit more difficult today than it was at the point when I got started. But if I put that aside, and let's say that there's a property out there that goes on the market, I would say think in your mind that you're probably going to look at 20, 30, 40 properties before you even make an offer. So don't think that, the first property you're going to look at is the one you're going to make an offer on. It might be, but don't think that going in because then you will settle. Right. You'll say, well, it's the only thing available out there. It's my first property I've looked at. I'm going to make an offer on this. No, set aside, what you want in those properties. There's certain things that you may be looking for. You want to look at, price range. First of all, you want to look at condition. Let's talk about condition for a minute. One of the things that you want to think about is how handy are you? Because if I've got a buddy who has well over 100 rental units.
Wow.
And he owns an HVAC company, a heating, ventilation, air conditioning company. And so he not only can do a lot of stuff himself, he has a crew of people who can go in, replace water heaters, replace flooring, take cabinets out, that kind of thing. So, whereas for me, I'm not that handy. It reminds me of the old Red Green show. Have you ever heard of that? You're probably too young for
No.
that. It was on PBS years ago. It was called the Red Green Show. That was his name, Red Green. And he's just a country guy. And he would close out the show every week by saying, if your wife doesn't find you handsome, at least let her find you handy. So, if you're
Can
handy, then,
I can I say I feel we've lost some of that today, like the handiness. I was,
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
but
So,
go on.
if you've got the ability, right, to handle things like toilet leaking or, hot water heater replacement, things that, I'm not talking about a total remodel where you're ripping the floors out and stuff like that. But if you can replace washers in a sink faucet, those kind of things, then, that's going to be really helpful because you're not going to have to call somebody and pay somebody, because they've got to drive out. They got to do what might be a 20-minute job and then they got to
Yeah.
drive back. So you're going to get charged for all of that. So the more handy you are, the better off you're going to be from a maintenance perspective. So when you're looking for a property, decide first of all, what condition do you want it in? If
Hmm.
you're really handy, that condition it can be fixer upper, right? Because you have the capability and ability to do that. For me, I don't need a fixer upper because I can do certain things, but I'm not built for that. I just don't have the capability to do it. So, we always tried to get properties that were in better condition so that we didn't have to go in and do a lot of maintenance before we rented the property out. So, one of the first things you want to think about is what condition do I want the property to be in? If the condition is bad, you're going to get a lot better price for it. And if you can then go in and do the work yourself, you're going to pay some money, but it's not going to be nearly what it would be to get the company up to speed from somebody else doing it, right? So,
Sure.
that's if you got that ability, go for a lower condition property. If you don't, go for something that's higher condition. So I would say that's one thing to look at. And you want to get someone who's independent to be an inspector. So, if you're new to this, if you're a beginning real estate investor, don't be afraid to get a third party inspector to inspect a home for you, because there's going to be things that you learn along the way. And remember, part of this is about learning, right? So you're always learning. Every day you're learning. And the people that you use that are working with you, they are the way I look at it is they are teaching me how to do this, right? And so I'll ask them a lot of questions. And so you want to get a good inspector. You'll want to have a good real estate agent as well, somebody who's going to be looking out for your interest. And what else should I share? So really, I mean, those are the main things is, somebody who can help you with the pricing, which is a real estate agent, somebody that can help you with the condition, which is an inspector. And then you need a good banker as well. And that's somebody who, if you're going to have a mortgage on a house, which most of us did and do, then, you need a good banker who's going to be on your side as well.
Sure, sure. All points that very insightful. Something that came to mind for me as you're speaking was what they say in real estate is what location, location, location.
Location. Yeah.
How do you decipher like what's a good location, what's a bad location? What does that even mean? Location, location, location. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, so let's talk about the duplexes for a bit. They happen to be in a university, just outside of a university town, and our market was not university students because we didn't want to deal with all of the parties and
Sure.
things that go on. But we did rent to faculty, and we rented to grad students. The people who were serious about what their study was, being graduate students, and people who were professors. So it helped to kind of get in that location. It was convenient for them. So you're looking for a location that's going to provide for you the renters that you're looking for, your target renter, your target tenant. If I think about the beach piece of this, the particular beach that we bought on, and again, it's a beach that we've been going to all our lives. We're very familiar with it. It's not something I just saw on the internet and thought I'd buy a house there. Just a little background on that. When we first started going there, the water system was not that great. They had well water for the town, but it was so close to the beach that it was called brackish. It was salty water. So to get fresh, clean water, you would have to go down to the fire station where they had, places to get clean water. So you'd bring your milk jugs, and you'd fill milk jugs with water. Well, since then, they have built a water treatment facility. And we just so happened to have bought our house there at about 3 or 4 months before that treatment plant went online. And so we are really reaping the benefits of having clean water in this home, because now people are going, hey, this is not a bad place. They don't know that you used to have to go down to get your water, right? And so, location is really important. Understanding, even if it's bad, even if the water is bad, knowing that there is a water treatment plant that's been built and they're getting it tested, they're getting it online. Buying at that point was really beneficial to us. So, location is, I don't know, location is different for every property, but there's got to be something that you can point at that property that says, this property is here. It puts me in line with the tenants that I'm looking for, or there's going to be something that's going to be valuable, whether it's a mall or Walmart or something that's going to go in near Starbucks. Maybe that would be big. something close by, or, a big working area, a big car plant, car manufacturing plant or something like that. So you're looking for something that's going to provide you the renters you're looking for and provide them with proximity to whatever it is that they're about. So for us at the beach, the proximity is to the beach. And so we're providing them with the ability to basically walk down our steps, walk over the dune, and they're on the beach. So that's a great location, right, for us to be at.
Now, when it comes to you got your perfect location, you already talked about, right, when you're managing the property, that you want to understand, one, if you can manage the property or how much you want to be involved. The properties, the duplexes that you picked up, or even the beachfront property, were these properties, 100% move-in ready when you bought them? Were they rent ready when you bought them, or did you have to do at least, I guess, some counter installation, cabinetry, carpets? What was the kind of upfront cost? Even what is the DIY type of front lawn greenery makeover?
Yeah, with the duplexes, it was important to me that they were rented or ready to rent. And because I remember I'm not the handiest guy in the world. So
Sure.
it was important to me from a condition perspective that they be either rented already or rentable. And so all of those, we didn't have to really do much. Now, we ended up, at that time, carpet was very popular. Right. So as renters changed over, and hardwood flooring became more of a I guess popular thing, we ended up changing out and putting in hardwood flooring. Hardwood, it might be a little misnomer. It's really the vinyl stuff, that the click flooring that they have. So, but we did that on our own, right? We did, but so when we bought the property, your question is, did you have to fix it up? And the answer is no, not on the duplexes. The beach house that we bought had already been renovated, so we didn't have much to do there. I did do some things, but it was within my capabilities. And now with the house in the mountains, we bought that, and it was a two-bedroom living room, kitchen, and a very small deck on the front. We ended up tearing all of that out, and we went up. So we had actually a spiral staircase that went up into like a balcony area, and that's where I filmed a lot of videos from my channel. Was there. You see, if you see a video of me, an older video that's got a lot of wood on the ceiling and stuff, that's at that place and up in that loft. So we ended up going with instead of it being a rectangle, it became a T, right? So we went out
Sure.
and we expanded the deck. So we ended up with 3 bedrooms and a sunroom and a big deck, and it was really nice. So we did a lot of work on that. It took about probably a year to kind of work through all of that. Then with this house, remember I said we bought this farm, and at the same time we bought a rental house just up the street from us. That house had not been lived in for 15 years. And so we didn't realize how bad a shape the house was in, but we didn't pay that much for it either. But we ended up ripping out everything. It was a brick house. So we left the brick, and we left maybe a few walls of the sheetrock, but we ripped all of the floor out. We ripped all of the floor joists out. We left the ceiling, and pretty much replaced everything else. So we put all new floor joists in, all new subfloor, all new flooring, all new sheetrock except for some of the walls. So there's been a lot of work done, but I didn't do a lot of that. Now back, I would say starting early September, I've been much more actively involved in that project. So that's really part of what caused me to be overloaded the last couple of
Sure.
months, is that property. And but we're almost done. We've got a little bit of electrical work that needs to be done this week. We'll have our final inspection on that, and then we can start renting it, hopefully, early December. So
It's
that's
amazing.
kind of fun. So it's kind of been the gamut for me. Mostly it's been rentable or, good condition properties. But this past one, we had to spend a lot of time and money
Nothing,
putting that
nothing
one
wrong with a
together.
little bit of a test.
That's right.
you,
I learned a lot though, right? I learned a
you
lot.
you had your easy experiences and had to throw a
That's
curveball at you.
right.
No,
Yeah.
it actually makes it for me at least, hearing you speak about the ready to rent properties, it actually makes it, very comfortable for me now to hear that and actually ease my way a little bit more into real estate because, at least for me, when I think about getting into real estate, I'm like, I got to find the perfect fixer upper, and
Mm,
I got to get this discounted property because that's going to be the most bang for my buck, which may be the case. But what also it sounds like I'm hearing you even share with this most recent purchase is that if it is that the fixer upper, you are putting in the expenses and it
mhm.
may give you a bigger headache than to just buy the ready to rent. But I'm curious if you have, friends also in real estate or, anyone whom in the real estate game who have bought fix and flips or fixer uppers.
Yeah, so remember I mentioned this friend of mine who has this HVAC company. One of the things he has two companies. He has a rental company, he has the HVAC company. And typically what he will do because he has the capability and the people, right, to do this, he will go in and buy homes that have been I don't know, how do I say this? The people who are renting them left, and as they left, they took all the copper piping out and all of that, right? So I mean, this really messed up homes. And if they have aluminum siding, which most siding today is vinyl, but if it was aluminum siding, they pulled the siding off and took it to the scrapyard, right? So he's bought houses like that in that condition because he knows how and has the capability to get that done quickly because
Sure.
he's got his own team and stuff like that. So I think that there are properties out there in any of those spectrums. So I would suggest that you decide what you want, right? Do you want to be that guy that like he does that goes in and turns it and and it's really cool because he's got a relationship now with Home Depot, the Home Depot in the town, and when they get things that they can't move, like he's gotten flooring, he's gotten
Wow.
what do you call it, the doors that slide open and closed. um it's leaving me right now, but so if you're wanting to cover up an entry but you don't want to have the door open into the room, it's got a track on the
And
top.
it goes like into the wall almost, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So he's gotten, those because they'll call him and they'll say, "We can't move these. Here's a price. Otherwise, I'm going to throw it in the trash," right? And he's got these warehouses that he says, "Yeah, that sounds great to me," right? So he will
Wow.
go and he'll pick that stuff up, pennies on the dollar. He doesn't know what he's going to use it for, but he knows he might use it in the future. And so he puts that in that storage room. Then he buys a house and he goes, "Wow, those doors would fit perfectly in here." He's already bought the doors. He bought them for pennies on the dollar. So he goes and he gets it and he puts it in. And it's almost, even though he has paid for it, it's been paid for with old money. So it's
Sure.
almost like it's free, right, to him. And so building relationships like that is critical. So, finding good talent that's how do I say, inexpensive, right? Plumbing, electrical, heating and air. If you don't have those skills, you need to find somebody that can help you with that. And then, finding supplies at a good, reasonable price is good. And to be honest, paint, you're just going to pay for paint. Don't, just hold your nose and then go get it because paint's expensive. So as you're painting walls and stuff, it's going to be a bigger cost than you think it will be. The paint's going to be more than the labor to put it up. So
Sure.
yeah, that's kind of the way he does it. I'm not built that way, but and he does very well. I would guess he's probably got $7 or $8 million worth of real estate like that.
No, like
So
I said, it's nice to hear though that you could, because again, it's so much reading I've done on real estate. It leads to the fixer upper, but what I'm hearing directly from you just delivers a lot of comfort. Again, is it's like, no, you can go out and get a ready to rent property and you will be paying it, down, right? But at the end of the day, it's ready to rent. You
Yep.
can immediately start to rent it out and get money and cash flow coming back in to you. Now, here's one I want to throw your way.
Hmm.
The biggest misconceptions or the most common mistakes that newer real estate investors are making from your perspective? What are they? How can we avoid them?
Yeah, I talk to younger people who are wanting to get into real estate, and there's a lot of loans out there that you can get, first time home buyer loans that are, 3% down, 5% down. I think that's a mistake because, at the end of the day, you're going to end up with this huge mortgage. And, if you're not putting some money down on that, it will eventually eat you up. And so I think, as I mentioned earlier, I found that as I began to pay these units off, that's where the real value started coming in to me. Because up until that point, the renter was paying the expenses, but I really didn't get anything out of it. It was, and a lot of times I had to pay in. If we were out of cash and we had a maintenance issue, then I had to pony the money up. But when I had these things paid off, it didn't matter what happens. We had plenty of cash flow coming in. So I would say don't get started too soon. I would say go ahead and begin saving. And if you want some experience in real estate, buy some REITs, right? I mean, you get some exposure to the real estate market that way. You don't have to deal with tenants, you don't have to deal with contracts, you don't have to deal with leases, you don't have to deal with any of that. It's you're buying a stock in a company basically, but you're getting exposure to the real estate market that can bite you and it can help you, right? And like in this market with interest rates going up, it's been a little bit of a struggle for REITs. But you would have that issue also if you had a variable mortgage and
Sure.
interest rates are going up, your variable mortgage is going to be going up. I would then recommend not to get a variable rate mortgage. I would get a fixed rate mortgage. That's the way I've done it my whole life. I've never had a variable rate mortgage. And they're, it feels better, it feels cheaper, it feels like, you're able to improve cash flow, but uh, you carry a lot of risk with that. And as the years go by and interest rates go up, it's out of your control, and all of a sudden you're paying a lot more for your mortgage than you were previously.
Sure.
So
Eliminate the
those are a couple of
surprises, if you
mistakes.
will.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you want to eliminate as many surprises as you can. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good way to put it.
No, it really, I mean, these are things that as you're talking, I'm thinking about, and I almost feel like there should be a simple path to real estate with Kevin Burgess. Because again, I haven't yet, and this may just be me, I haven't yet heard from someone who's just been buying ready to rent properties. I have a couple friends who are actually right in the real estate game, and they're not invested in the stock market. They actually just jumped right into real estate. So this poses a question for you. What do you recommend? I know you started off, getting into the stock market and then into real estate, but would you recommend vice versa? Would you recommend jumping in first for real estate? Because again, some of these, I guess, depending on the time, right, and with the interest rates. But what would you say is best for someone in their early 20s or 30s? They want to get into real estate or they want to get into investments rather. Do you go to the stock market and build a foundation there, or do you go into real estate?
Yeah, I would recommend if you don't have that 20% down, right? If you don't have the capital to get started in real estate, I would definitely start with the stock market. And as I mentioned early, in this discussion, the returns that you get in the stock market are similar to those you get in real estate. It's just that nobody's paying them for you. So if you're putting that money in, and let's say you're putting in, I don't know, 5,000 a year, right? But you're going to need $40,000 for the mortgage that is going to buy the property that you want. Then, you would normally have to save for 8 years at $5,000 a year to get $40,000. But over, if that is doubling every 3 to 5 years, then you don't have to wait that long. right? You're going to get those returns. It's going to be able to get you to a place where you're going to have that nest egg to then dump into a property. So that's the approach I would take. I would not go and try to get a 1% down property, 2%, 5%, whatever it is. I would wait until I had the 20%, but I would take my money and I would put it in the stock market and let that grow over time till I get to that place. And then I would take it and put it in a real estate property. Then I would continue with the
Sure.
stock market and let this property grow. And then when you get to the place where you can do it again, that's what I would do. So that would be
What
the approach I would take today.
what fund would you put it in? Like, would it be like an SCHD or more like a, Vanguard Total Stock Market, VTI type of fund, if you're trying to save
Yeah.
specifically for real estate? Because I reckon you wouldn't want to just throw it into an individual stock, right? For
Right.
10, 15,
Right.
20 years. You want the whole market. Which route
Yeah.
would you go?
Yeah, that's a hard question because well, it's not a hard question. It's a difficult question because difficult to answer because of the specifics to it. But the way I think about it is if I'm looking at 5 years or less, I typically don't want to put it in the stock market. So if you're saying, hey, I got one more year left and then I'm ready, I don't know that I would dump all of it in the stock market, regardless of what the investment is, right? If you're a ways out and need to get some momentum in that, I would do it. But what I would focus on, I think, I mean, this is not a recommendation, but if I were doing it, what I would do is I would probably put it in the S&P 500 in like a VOO, or something like that. Not necessarily the total stock market, but I would go after the top 500 companies. I
Sure.
think that's the way I would do it. And that way you're fully diversified. You're not picking stocks. You're not gambling. You're not betting, right? I mean, I guess you're gambling that the market's going to do better, but you're not gambling on an individual company that way. So I
Now,
think that would be the approach I would take.
you shared before, and I'll nitpick this one.
Hmm.
You shared before that your first property that you find probably is not going to be the property. And it
Right.
might take 5, 10, 15, 19 properties before you get to the property. How do you know when it is the property?
Yeah, and when I think back, I think after having looked at some properties, you need to have some of those properties under your belt to even know what you're looking for, right?
Sure.
So when you look at that very first property, you're going, I have no idea what I'm looking for, right? I don't know if that, uh,
But it
you
looks
know,
great.
yeah, it looks great to me. I mean, it's a structure, it's standing up, it's got a roof on it. What else could I be looking for? So, as you look at properties, the reason I said, don't buy your first one is I wouldn't be in a big hurry because you're trying to learn, right? You're trying to learn what is a property that I'm looking for. Now, you may end up on your 15th property going, man, that first property I looked at, I wish I'd jumped on it, right? But I wouldn't jump on the first one because you're in the process of learning. You're trying to figure out what works for you. And, what works for you and what worked for me may be totally different. And so you're trying to figure out what is best for you and your situation and the way you think and the way you, just go about your business. So I don't know. I would say that, just enjoy the process and don't be um don't be in too big of a hurry.
Sure.
Enjoy the process and find something. And I think, I mean, that sounds kind of utopian, I guess, but I think you'll know it when you see it. I think you'll say, wow, look at the school district is incredible here. It's close to jobs, and it's a great home and it's a great neighborhood. Maybe this is the right one. And then you got to decide, do I want a single home? Do I want a duplex? Do I want a triplex? Do I want a quadplex? Do I want an apartment building? What is it that you really want? I mean, there's just a lot of questions that you have to answer for yourself, your own specific wants and desires that you're probably not going to know when you look at that first property.
Sure.
So,
Now, here's
yeah.
an interesting one, especially because you just kind of shared it's going to be an individual answer. But I'm curious to know for
Yeah.
yourself, how did you know to settle on a duplex as opposed to a single family? Because you do have a lot of real estate investors who specifically go after single family homes. Then you have
Mhm.
the duplex chasers, right? And the multifamily. So I'm curious to know from your perspective, what should we start off with? Maybe it is a single family, or because you had the experience, the single family you bought was your own single family, and so you were
Yeah.
house hunting for it. You got that experience. Where should an investor, a real estate investor, start? The duplexes or single family?
Yeah, I think there's less risk in duplexes. And now, why did I start with duplexes? Some of that was luck, right? It happened to be what was available, and it was in that area where we had, great location, and they were great units, and so it was in a little cul-de-sac, really off the beaten path. So, people who wanted quiet and peace, could rent those places, and it was not too far away from everything, but it was in its own little secluded area. So there was just a lot about it that we loved, and so we started buying in there. Uh, if there had been single family homes in there, we may have bought those, right? It was the location really more than the style of home. But having the ability to rent both sides and having the rent be enough to pay for the whole mortgage. When the other side was vacant was a big deal as well. So you're running more risk with a single family home because when somebody moves out, it's going to take you a little time to get it rented. So
Sure,
you gotta fix it up. You gotta, paint the walls and things like that. So it's going to be empty for a certain amount of time. If you got a year lease, let's say, if people leave, you got to paint the walls, you got to clean everything, right? And then you end up with, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 weeks that it's not going to be rented. And guess who gets to pay the mortgage? The owner of the property, which is me. So, but having a duplex, if one side is rented, I've still got some cash coming in, and that cash is paying for the mortgage and things. So it eliminates the risk. There were some fourplexes in that particular area that I was really interested in buying, but they never came up for sale. So I would have loved the fourplexes as well, I think,
sure,
because that would have been, having two or three rented at a time, while you had one that you were trying to rent would have been even better, right?
sure. But
So,
that would probably come
yeah,
after a little bit of experience, right? After like a
yeah,
duplex.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, an interesting question here, whether it's a duplex, triplex, fourplex, wherever you may find yourself, whatever you may be renting out, when it comes to the lease,
Yeah.
the duration of a lease, because even to your point just now, it sounds like that month is critical, that you, as the owner, as Mr. Monopoly, now you have to put your own money down. But at the same token, if you don't get the right tenant, and you have not a great tenant in there, you're going to have to go through the eviction process, which may take some time. So is it better to have a shorter lease? Is it better to have a longer lease, 2, 3 years? Again, it goes back to trying to find the right tenant, which is a I think a harder process, right? You never really know someone until they're actually literally living in one of your properties.
Right. Right.
But what route would you go? A shorter lease, a longer lease, so you can avoid those, month turnovers?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question because people kind of go at that in different ways. One way is to have a month to month lease, right? Where you're saying, hey, each month we will kind of re-up this, and if either of us want out of this situation, we can have that. So, and I've actually done that before, not with our properties, but when I was relocating for jobs, I would have a month to month lease because we were going to be buying a house in the area and I needed something I could get out of relatively quickly. So I think it depends on what your target tenant is. For us, though, when we were renting those duplexes, we were focused on an annual lease. And we didn't really want month to month because we wanted to kind of have that locked in.
Sure.
Now, you end up, and you mentioned it, is you're going to end up with people who don't take care of your property. Just as an example, we had a tenant who decided that they wanted to go to Disney, which is awesome. I'm glad they got to go to Disney. And they left for the week, and they locked their dog in the bathroom and left it food and left the toilet lid open. And so the dog ended up tearing the door up because it was trying to get out, and it was just a horrible situation. So we ended up having to deal with that tenant, and ultimately got them out of the property because they just made bad choices. They made bad decisions. They didn't care about the property. But yeah, so that's the risk you run, right? If you have a longer term lease, like a year, because you have somebody who has a lease to be there. But I think the benefits of having them in there locked in for a term outweigh the fact that they could damage the property. Plus,
Sure.
you need to be able to get some rents, let's say 12 months of rents to be able to cover the cost of changing that property over because, you either have to get the carpets cleaned or you got to paint the walls or there's stuff that you've got to get done to the property to make it ready for the next renter. And all of that costs money. And if you're doing it yourself, it takes time, right?
Sure.
So, yeah. That's
I
it's a great
always thought
question.
about the dog in my head, and I go, what in what world do you leave a dog in a bathroom and think that it's going to be all right for a week? You know,
Yeah. I don't know.
this again,
Yeah,
these are
we're
the
still
things.
scratching our heads over that one.
These are the things sometimes you're thinking about a tenant, right? Like you'll
Yeah.
never know if your tenant will potentially leave a dog in the bathroom to go to Disney. It's like
Right.
you
Right.
can't screen for that one. But
And another point on that is you're going to have situations like that as a landlord. And so be ready for that and realize that, you got to work through how to deal with situations like that.
sure.
And you can't get all mad and go throwing stuff because it's not going to help, right? You got to figure out a way to work together to get through, to resolve the situation and get to an amicable solution. So it takes the right temperament to be a landlord. And so you're going to learn a lot about people, and some of it's not very fun. So,
Kevin, what was your biggest misconception when it comes to real estate investing?
I think my biggest misconception was that I was going to go in, I was going to be able to have these properties grow in value, refinance them. The bank was just going to be there waiting for me to come in, had this money in their hand, and they were going to be, "Oh, Kevin, we're so glad you're here. We've been wondering what we were going to do with this money. Let's give that to you. Yeah, we don't care what the value of that property is. Here's this money, and you go and buy another piece of property," right? I found that it was much more difficult. The refinancing process was much more difficult than I had originally imagined. And it was much more expensive because there's a lot of fees and things like that, especially if you're pulling cash out of a property. So if you're just refinancing an existing mortgage, it's a little different. But if you are saying, "Hey, I want to not only refinance that mortgage, but I want to pull some of the equity out as well, and I
Sure.
want you to give me that in cash, and now I'm going to take that and invest it in another property." They don't like that so well. So the biggest misconception I had was the availability of funds for a guy like me at that time who was asset rich but cash poor, right? So
Fascinating.
yeah,
I got one last question for you here before we close out for this go round here, Masters of
it's
the
ought to be a good
Market.
one then.
And I want to just ask, right? Because obviously, throughout whether it's your investing career, whether it was in real estate or the stock market, or that ham sandwich, or actually what was the fund, the $1 billion fund that you actively oversaw, right? You have so much experience when it comes to investing, a lot of insight to offer, not just younger viewers, but elder viewers. I mean, every
Mm.
time you're on Masters of the Market, the comments that I get when it comes to you is the people want Kevin Burgess back and sharing information. So, what would be, Kevin, your biggest piece of advice that you, and if you can only offer just one piece of advice before somebody begins down the real estate investment journey, what would that piece of advice be?
Yeah, that's a tough question because there are a bunch of pieces of advice. And so if I have to boil those down to one, I think it would be to get educated. I think I would want to get educated on property values. I would want to get educated on the tax system. I would want to get educated on the process for eviction in your particular county because they're all different. So I mean, you see what I'm doing here. I'm taking a bunch of pieces and I'm kind of wrapping it into one.
You'll
But
be a
there's a lot of
politician soon.
there's a lot of education that needs to happen. And so as you are looking at properties and as you're taking your time and you're looking at 10, 15, 20 properties, take the time also to educate yourself on all that goes with it, whether it's financing, whether it is taxes, whether it is, maintenance, who are the contractors in your area that you could get, who are the plumbers, who are the electricians, who, go ahead and build those lists and begin to educate yourself on who they are and even build some relationships with them as you go. So I think education is the thing I would do first, and that would be the highest pinnacle for me at the and in the early stages is
Sure.
to get educated.
I guess I'll squeak one more question in here when it comes to education. Are there any books out there? Are there any websites that you have in mind or would recommend to educate ourselves? Or is it more the University of Hard Knocks of really getting out there, speaking to people, building those relationships, and being on the ground?
Yeah, I'm not sure about websites, but I do know when I was starting this that, and I don't, they're in boxes now because we haven't unpacked everything here at the farm yet, but there were real estate books and some of those were Robert Kiyosaki, right? And about, but there were other books as well about, rentals and about, negotiating deals and about, there's all kinds of real estate books out there, and they are probably now online. They're probably, electronic, but mine are hard copy. But I would just start Googling real estate transactions, real estate purchases, and I'm sure that there's a lot more today than there was even when I started. But I will say this that after you've gone through this school of hard knocks, you're still going to get some hard knocks, right? Even if you've educated yourself. But after you've gone through that, there's a lot that you will think about that you've experienced that will cause you to make better decisions because you've been there and you've experienced it. So don't be afraid of the school of hard knocks. I think of it like a college education. Sometimes they're expensive, right? So the dog in the bathroom, that was an expensive thing. We ended up keeping their deposit, but it wasn't it wasn't enough to pay for everything, right? So, so it was a school of hard knocks, but it was and I consider it like tuition for a class. So I got a class in how to pick the right renter, and it cost me tuition because we had to repair the damage. So, that's the way I kind of look at it. And so look at every situation, good and mostly the bad ones, because that's where we learn the most is in the bad situations. Look at every bad situation as an education, as a class. And you're gonna have to pay tuition in some cases, but don't worry about the tuition because it's going to come back to you multifold as your life goes forward, as you get into bigger and bigger transactions, bigger and bigger deals, more and more units. Learning a lot when you're small is going to pay a lot of dividends as you grow your monopoly empire. So
I can honestly listen to the insights, Kevin, of yours. I can only share with other investors who are out there to please head over to Kevin's channel. He's talking a lot about the stock market, of course. I hope we get you to talk more about real estate investing as well on your channel because you
mm,
have just a whole heap of insights and knowledge for all of us who are looking to learn the ins and outs of investing. Kevin Burgess, investors. Kevin, thank you so much again for joining me here on Masters of the Market. And, I can't say you won't be on here very soon. So I'll see you next time on Masters of the Market with me, probably in the next couple of weeks. All
That sounds good. Yeah, just give me a call, man.
right, Kevin, thank you so much. And investors, until the next one, we will see you all there.